Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Brandon, and today I want to show you another method of Windows privilege escalation. Now, this method has to do with a user being assigned the SE backup privilege. Now, what this privilege does is, well, it's intended for users to be able to create backup copies of the system. So with this privilege, users are able to have full read access to the file system, and this actually ignores ACLs that may be in place. So a user that has SE backup privilege will be able to read any file on the entire file system, including sensitive files like the SAM and system registry hives. And as an attacker, we can exploit that for privilege escalation by, accessing some of those sensitive files and extracting the credentials from it. So the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and set this up in our lab. We're going to be doing this on a regular Windows 10 machine, and then we're also going to be going through and doing it on a Windows domain controller because the process of exploiting it can be a little bit different. So let's just start off on this regular Windows 10 machine. This is just a standard install of Windows 10, nothing really on here, and it is not joined to a domain. But if it is joined to a domain, that's okay too. The first thing that we're going to do is just create a new user to assign the SE backup privilege to. So we're going to do this by net user. We'll just call it backup_SVC. And then let's give it a password of, we'll do Conda123 bang, and then /add. So this will add our new backup SVC user. So if we do a net user now, we see that we have that user account here. The next thing that we're going to do is add this user to the remote management users group in order for them to be able to use WinRM to access the machine. Later on, we're going to be exploiting this from our Kali machine, so it'll be a bit easier if we just have WinRM access instead of just a less stable shell. It'll be more realistic to the exploitation environment. So to do this, we'll do net local group, remote management users, and then the backup SVC. I always forget about the tab complete here, so we'll do backup_SVC and then /add. So that will add the user to the remote management group. Now we can go in with WinRM. Now, in order to enable WinRM, if you don't have that enabled already, you're going to have to do enable PS remoting, and then we'll just do a -force. So this should enable WinRM and add the appropriate firewall rules and things like that. If you don't already have it set up on your machine, I already have it set up, so we're going to see that it's already there. Now, the next thing we need to do is actually assign the SE backup privilege to that user, and we're going to be doing that with a PowerShell module called Carbon. I'll leave a link below to the documentation in the description so you can read up on it if you'd like. It's super useful if you're doing any PowerShell scripting with user privileges and automation and things like that. So in order to install Carbon, we're going to do install-module, and then the name is Carbon, and all right. Perfect. And just hit enter there. That should go ahead and install the Carbon module. Now, if you don't actually have NuGet installed on your machine currently, it might prompt you to install that, and just go ahead and install that as well so you can install the Carbon module. Now, we'll just need to import the Carbon module. So we'll do import module Carbon. There we go. And now that we have the Carbon module imported, we can start to use the commandlets that come with that module. Specifically, we want to be using the grant-privilege commandlet, and this is what we're going to be using to give SE backup privilege to our backup SVC account. So in order to do this, we're going to do -identity and specify the name of the user we just created, which is backup SVC, and then we'll do -privilege, and we are giving it SE backup privilege. All right. So now, just to test to see that that went through properly, we're going to go and just use the last command, change grant to test, and use the test privilege commandlet. And if that comes back as true, we know that that backup SVC user does actually have the SE backup privilege. Now, but just to confirm that, I'm going to jump right over to a Kali machine here, and let's just go ahead and full screen this. Now, we're going to just go ahead and WinRM to our machine, our Windows 10 machine. Let's just get the IP right here. So we'll do a quick IP config, 192.168.123. Perfect. So now I'm going to go over here. We're going to use evil WinRM just to WinRM into that machine. We'll do -I for the IP address, which is 192.168.1.23, -U for the username, which is backup_SVC, and -P for the password, which is Conda123 bang. Now, this should give us a WinRM session into the machine as the actual backup SVC user, and this is probably the step that you'll be at when you go to perform the privilege escalation. And if you do a whoami/privs, we should see that we have, it's just whoami/priv. I always get that mixed up. You should see that we have SeBackupPrivilege here, and this is where we're actually going to start to going into exploiting this SeBackupPrivilege in order to get local administrator on the machine. So keep in mind that with this SeBackupPrivilege, we can read and access any file on the system. Now, your typical copy commandlets will not work. You have to use a different kind of copying, and I'll leave a link below to a GitHub repository, which has some DLLs that you can import if you need to access files that I'm not going to be showing you in this video, because your typical copy will not work. You'll have to follow the instructions in that GitHub repo. But all we are going to be doing is using the reg command to actually export some registry hives that we can use to extract the password hashes from the system and SAM registry hives. So to get started, the first thing that we're going to do is we'll just make a directory called c/temp, and let's cd into there. So we'll cd into c/temp just to have a cleaner working environment. All right. Now in here, we are just going to actually create a copy of the system and SAM registry hives, and then we can use PyPyCats or Mimikatz on our machine to go ahead and extract the hashes. So we're just going to do a reg save hklm/sam, and then we're going to put that in. Oh, accidentally hit enter there. So it's going to be c/temp, and then we'll just call this sam.hive. Awesome. So that is completed successfully. If we do a dir, we can see we have that there. Now the next thing we're going to do is save the system hive. So we'll do reg save hklm/system, and we're just going to put that into c/temp/system.hive is fine. And there we go. So that is complete. We can see that we have both of those there. And now since we have an evil WinRM session, we can actually just use the built-in download command to get these onto our Kali machine. So we're just going to do a download of sam.hive, and that will transfer that back to our Kali machine from the Windows box. And then we'll do a download system.hive as well to download that file. Now this one could take a couple seconds. These system hives can be a little bit larger, so don't worry if that takes a couple seconds to do. Awesome. So now that those two files have been downloaded, I'm just going to exit out of our WinRM session, and we can see we have this sam.hive and system.hive in here. So in order to extract the hashes from that SAM and system registry dump, we're going to be using PyPyCats. Now, you can install this with pip, or if you look it up, you can find the GitHub repository and see some instructions on installing it there. It's essentially just Mimikatz written in Python, so we can go ahead and run it on our Linux machine. So we're going to be using the registry function here. So if we just do PyPyCats registry, you can see the syntax of the command. So we're going to do PyPyCats registry and then -- sam, the name of the SAM file that we just copied, which we called sam.hive. And then the last argument is the path to the system hive, which we just called system.hive. Now, once we run this command, we're going to get the NTLM hashes of all of the users that were actually in the SAM registry, which is awesome. Now, you don't actually have to go ahead and crack these. We can just pass the hash to get back in as administrator. So, for example, here's our administrator account. We can take the hash right here, and then we'll copy that. Now we can do an evil winrm -i, and then the IP address of our target, which is 192.168.1.23, -u for the username, which in our case is administrator. And then we can do -H for hashes and just paste the hash in there. Now this is going to do a pass the hash, and we can get it in without ever having to know what the actual password is. And later on, I'll do a more in-depth video of how pass the hash actually works. But you can see that now we have successfully exploited the SeBackupPrivilege to take a copy of the SAM and system registry hives, export those to our Kali machine, extract the hashes from the SAM registry, and then pass the hash back in to get administrator access on the machine. And that's how you can do this for machines that are not a domain controller, but it's a little different for machines that are a DC because of the way that passwords are stored in a different file. So let's jump over to our Windows 2016 domain controller and take a look at how that will work. All right, so now we are on our Windows 2016 domain controller, and we're going to go through exploiting this SeBackupPrivilege all over again, setting it up, and then going through exploiting it as well, because it's a little bit of a different process and a little bit more complex. Actually, if you saw the Hack the Box Blackfield live stream I did with infinite logins, you saw us struggle through this privilege escalation method quite a bit, so I figured it'd be great to revisit it and do a video on it now that I understand it more. So the first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and add a new Active Directory user. So we'll go to Active Directory users and computers. Let's right-click on user and select new and user right down here. Awesome. So we'll just create a Jane Smith, for example. We'll go ahead and create that. And then the user logout name, we'll just call it Jane Smith. Awesome. So now we have this user created. Let's set a password on this account. Doesn't really matter what that password is. Okay, and let's uncheck this box so they don't have to change their password when they log in. Awesome. So now we have our Jane Smith user on our domain. So now what we're going to do is let's go ahead and find that Jane Smith user. And let's go right click and hit add to group. Now for this group, we're going to add them to the backup operators group. So I'll explain that in just a second. So let's see, you can go ahead and check names. Awesome. Hit OK. And now perfect. Now if we go ahead and click on Jane Smith and member of, we can see that they are part of the backup operators group. Now it is important that the user is part of this backup operators group. They don't necessarily need to be part of the group, but it's easier than assigning the permissions by hand with Carbon, as we did before. Now, but with the domain controller exploiting this, we do need to have SeBackupPrivilege and SeRestorePrivilege. We'll get to the whys of that in just a little bit, but this is the easiest way to give the user those two permissions, is adding them to the backup operators group. They'll instantly be given the SeBackupPrivilege and the SeRestorePrivilege, which is exactly what we're going to need for this priv situation. So I'm just going to hit OK here, and everything should be all set. Let's jump over to our Kali machine and try to WinRM in. So let's do eval WinRM -I 192.168.1.179 -U, and that was Jane Smith, and -P for the password, which is Conda 123 bang. All right, that did not work. Actually, I think we forgot to add the user to the remote management users group. So let's just go back to users and computers. Let's find our Jane Smith down here and go to member of, add, and then we want remote management users. All right, we'll hit check names. Awesome, that's all set. Hit apply and OK. Now let's jump back over to our Kali machine and we'll try that again. So now we should be able to get our actual WinRM session. Perfect, now we're in. So let's just do a who am I /all and see all the permissions and groups and stuff that we are a part of. So you can see we are part of this built-in /backup operators group as expected. And the special permissions that come with that are SeBackupPrivilege, just like we exploited before. But we also have SeRestorePrivilege, which we are going to need in this case as well. So if you find yourself on a domain controller and you have these permissions, chances are you're going to be able to exploit these to get the hashes of all of the domain users and go ahead and get domain admin as well. Now, the way that we're going to be doing this is by obtaining a copy of the ntds.dit file. This is where all of the password hashes are stored for domain users on a domain controller. So the first thing we're going to do is let's just go into the c/temp directory. If you don't have that directory, you can just go ahead and make it. And let's see. So right now we have two DLLs in here, and I'll explain where those came from. So if you remember when I was talking about the Windows 10 box, I mentioned a GitHub repository for copying files that, weren't the registries we were just interacting with. And here is the repository that you're going to need. I'll drop a link below in the description so you can go ahead and check this out for yourself. But essentially, this is going to give us a way to copy files with that SeBackupPrivilege, because the standard copy functions are not going to work, because the way the permissions are signed with the SeBackupPrivilege, the standard copies don't do exactly what we need to do. We actually need to create backups, which is a different way of reading files. There's a little bit of an explanation here. You can read into it if you would like. But you can see that they have some instructions on how to use the things that are in here, which is the SeBackupPrivilege utils.dll and the SeBackupPrivilege.commandlets.dll. So I've already cloned this repository. So if we go back here and we take a look at the directory, we can see we have this SeBackupPrivilege. So we cd into SeBackupPrivilege and then SeBackupPrivilege commandlets and then /bin and debug. If we do an ls in here, you can see we have these two DLL files. Now you're going to have to transfer these onto your target machine. I just did that with a WinRM upload, and that's how we got these two DLL files in here. Now the next thing we're going to need to do is just import these. So if we just do an import module, and then /, and then first one we'll do is SeBackupPrivilege commandlets.dll. Then let's go ahead and do the same thing again, but with the SeBackupPrivilege utils.dll. Perfect. And now we're going to have the functionality needed to actually copy files. Now, the way that we can actually use this is we can use a commandlet from that module, which is called copy-file SeBackupPrivilege. All right. And now the syntax of this is just going to be the file name of the file we want to copy and then the destination. So in our case, we do want c/windows/ntds/ntds.dit, and we're going to put that into c/temp/ntds.dit. Now we're going to see that this is not actually going to work. So if we hit enter, you can see it's going to say the process cannot access the file because it's being used by another process. Now, this file is going to be constantly in use with our domain controller because that's where all the hashes and authentication and stuff is done. So that file is always going to be in use. Now, in order to get around this, we can use shadow copy. Now, this is a function that is built into Windows, which we can use to actually copy a file even while it's in use and put it somewhere else. So essentially what we need to do is create a copy of this NTDS file with shadow copy, and then our copy of the file will not be in use, and we can use that file to actually extract the hashes from. So in order to do this, we're going to be using the disk shadow exe command, and let's see. I have a little script written out for that. If we go to cd, let's see, /yt, we should see that here. So the disk shadow exe command, that can actually take in a script as a parameter, which makes it a little bit easy for us to work with. So I have this copy.txt. So let's open that up. Cat copy.txt. Awesome. So here are the commands we're actually going to be using to create a new shadow copy of our drive, which we can then interact with. Essentially what this is going to do is create a full copy of our C drive, and then we're going to be saving it as the X drive. So one thing to note is that when we do this set metadata here, you need to specify a directory which you currently have write access to. So in my case, it's c/temp, but you can find some other directories as well. And the file name after here doesn't really matter. That's just where it's going to save some of the metadata of the disk shadow. And then just keep in mind we have this priv copy. That's what we're going to be naming or putting an alias as for our shadow copy. You can change this to whatever you want. Just make sure it's consistent with whatever you put down here as well. I'll drop a link down below to some of the documentation on disk shadow if you want to read about more of how it works and why we're doing it this way. But after you write this script out on your Kali machine, make sure you do a Unix to DOS. So the Unix to DOS on copy.txt, and that's going to fix a lot of the spacing and things like that that can occur because the way new lines are handled in a Linux environment and in a Windows environment are different. So this will fix some of those irregularities for us. Let's pop back over to our WinRM session, and now we're just going to upload our copy.txt. Awesome. So now if we do a dir, we can see we have copy.txt here. Awesome. So the next thing that we need to do is run this copy.txt with disk shadow, which we're really feeding commands line by line to disk shadow. It's like an interactive command prompt utility. So if we do disk shadow, and then we'll do /s and then copy.txt to execute that copy.txt script with disk shadow. And now after running that, we should have a full copy of our C drive on the X drive. And you'll see that mine's going to complain about the drive letter already being in use. That's just because I've done this already. But yours should go just fine. And now we can use the X drive copy of the ntds.dit file and be able to copy that with our SE backup privilege because it will not be in use, unlike the one that is on the C drive. So to do this, let's just go ahead and do the copy-file SE backup privilege. Awesome. And then we're going to specify x:/windows/ntds/ntds.dit, and let's put that into c/temp/ntds.dit. So now we should, if we do a dir, we can see that we have this ntds.dit file, and that is where all the domain hashes are stored on the domain controller. So same as before, we also need to do a reg save hklm/system, and we're just going to put that in c/temp/system.back, and that should go ahead and save the system registry hive as well. So we should see that in there. And now we can just go ahead and download both of these with WinRM. We'll just do download ntds.dit. And now that that is finished, we also want to go ahead and download our system.back file to go ahead and transfer that over to our Kali machine. All right, so now we have transferred both the ntds.dit file and the system.back file over to our Kali machine. Now we can now go ahead and extract all of the hashes from this file with secret stump from Impacket. So we can do this if we just do secret stump.py, and then if you don't have this installed, you can get it from GitHub, you can get it from pip, you can get it from apt. There's so many different ways to install Impacket, but you should probably have that by default on Kali. So we'll do secret stump.py -ntds, and then the name of our ntds file, and then -system, the name of our system file, which is system.back, and then local. So as this runs, it should go through and extract all of the hashes from the ntds.dit database, and that is actually going to give us, all the hashes that we're going to need, including domain admin, right? So everything that is stored in there, and then we'll be able to go ahead and pass the hash to get into the domain as a domain administrator. So this just took a few seconds to run, but you can see now we have a list of all the NTLM hashes for all of the accounts in the domain, and that is what we love to see. I love seeing credentials for all of our accounts out here. So let's go ahead and just find the domain administrator one. So let's see, we have administrator right here. That's perfect. So we'll grab this hash right here. Let's copy that, and then let's go over to WinRM again. So we'll do evil WinRM -u administrator, and then -H for the hash. So we'll paste that hash in there, -I for the IP, and that's 192.168.1.179. And now we should be able to get in as administrator through pass the hash on the domain controller. So now we have domain admin on the machine. So that is how we can use SeBackupPrivilege on a Windows system for privilege escalation on a regular machine or on a domain controller. If you found this video useful, please remember to like and subscribe down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.